Management Forum. I'm Jason Ebley of Benchmark Planning. Our firm has been working closely with the Planning Department and the Steering Committee to work on updating the county's comprehensive plan. The agenda tonight is on the screen before you. We have a brief overview of the comprehensive plan process. We'll have our panel will provide some presentations from each one providing their perspective, and then we'll have some questions. Hopefully you all have some questions for the speakers. And then we'll talk a little bit about the last forum that's coming up. The purpose of the plan is to develop a community vision for Lancaster County. It will guide land use and development throughout the county, which is why this forum is so important. Guide for capital investments and community initiatives. And also the plan is required by the state of South Carolina. So if you have zoning, you have to have a plan. And so we're going to have a particular focus of this plan on growth management, transportation, agriculture, natural resources, recreation, open space, economic development, community beautification. And as you'll hear a little bit further in the presentation, we're actually looking at 3 different geographic areas of the county: the Panhandle, Greater Lancaster, and Southern Lancaster, because this is such a unique and widely different county from end to end. The project timeline, just we're about at the halfway point. Tonight we're talking about the key topic exploration. We'll then be moving into preparing area plans for each of those areas of the county that I mentioned, as well as the full comprehensive plan in March. It's a rough time frame. And then, hopefully sometime around July, the plan will be considered for adoption. So part of the process, as I mentioned, is these key topic forums. On September 8th, we actually had a forum in Kershaw, and that was focused on agriculture and natural resources. On the 29th, some of you may have participated in that meeting concerning economic development. It's held at the Lancaster County Administration Building. And tonight, we're here to talk about land use and growth management. And the final forum will be transportation focused on the 27th, so hope that you will attend that. And that will be located at the Crossbridge Conference Center, just like this meeting will begin at 6:30. And just so you know, these are recorded, so that you can go online and hear these presentations or share them with some of your neighbors and friends that could not attend tonight. So tonight's panelists, we have Tyson Smith with us. Tyson is a partner with White & Smith Planning and Law Group, also is an attorney and a planner. He's located in Charleston. We also have John Hardy with us. He's Vice President of Land Acquisition for Lennar Homes, and he's focused on Charlotte, Greenville, and the Columbia area. Brady Bucy is with us. Brad is the District Manager of Lancaster County Water and Sewer District. And we also have Bryan Vaughn. He is the Director of Communications and Safety with Lancaster County School District. We have Ben Levine. He's Planning Commissioner with the Lancaster County Planning Commission. And then finally, Rox Burhans, who's the Planning Director for the county. So, each of these panelists have a different perspective on growth and development. So hopefully this will be a good opportunity for you to hear from all these different perspectives, and we'll go from there with questions once we finish. So, Tyson, come on up and get us started.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Jason said, my name is Tyson Smith. I'm a co-owner of White & Smith Planning and Law Group. We are a firm of attorneys, planners, and urban designers who work on zoning codes and related matters around the country, and including here in South Carolina. What I'm here to talk about briefly tonight is the ongoing rewrite of the Unified Development Ordinance in Lancaster County. This is a corollary to the planning process, and that's why I've been asked to join tonight. The code is what implements the plan. The plan is the vision, the code is how the vision gets implemented. We started undertaking this project in 2021. Kelly Cousineau, who you see here on the screen, is our project manager for this. The other folks on the screen here are assisting. We've got Sean Scootmeyer, who's also a planner and an attorney. He's in Greenville. My partner, Mark White, and Justin Wallace, who's a planner and an architect and urban designer as well. So, who we are, we're a planning and zoning firm. Several of us have law degrees, but we don't really practice law much anymore. But we bring that to our code drafting experience. We work around the country, as I said, Do a lot of work here in South Carolina. I've highlighted some of the clients that we're working with now. Currently, you'll see the plan image there in the bottom right from the comprehensive plan I work with Benchmark on in Aiken. Most of the codes we work on, including this one, of course, comes on the heels of adopting a comprehensive plan. As Jason said, in South Carolina, if you're going to zone, you've got to have a plan, and the statutes require that your zoning be in accordance with that comprehensive plan. I was also asked to touch on growth management, some of the trends we're seeing around the country and in the state. One thing we know is that growth is occurring rapidly, and though we may have some dips, they say we will, but they always say that. I expect in this area you're going to be seeing growth continue for a while, upwards. I use this graphic quite frequently as a way of just building some perspective. It's really remarkable how quickly we've grown in this country in just a couple hundred years. When the Bill of Rights and the Constitution were ratified, we had less than 4 million people in this country. And look at how many we have now. So our perspectives change rapidly. Certainly, the expectation in Lancaster County is that growth is going to continue. These are some images from the local council of governments that indicate growth projections for the county. That we know. The question then is, how do you manage that growth? What are you trying to accomplish? Is the rate of the growth, is it happening too quickly? Is the location of the growth happening in the right places, not the right places? Is the sheer amount of it? Is the type? What about the impacts on infrastructure? That's one that we hear more and more. That's been a real challenge in the last 2 or 3 decades since funding has been more of a challenge for public infrastructure. Or is it the quality of life? And there's a different response available in communities across the country for each of these challenges, wherever the sense is in terms of what the challenge is with growth management. You can have design standards, you can have infrastructure standards that are applied when new growth is approved or considered for approval. You can adjust density standards. Some communities are more direct in the way they limit growth by having point systems. I started my career in Monroe County in Florida. They have a point system that's based on the ability to evacuate before a hurricane. They just give out a certain number of permits a year. By the way, this is not what we're talking about in Lancaster County, I should say. But I want to point out that there is that end of the spectrum. And then there are tier systems, of course, that you see. And these were very common in the 70s and 80s, less common now. And that is, we're going to grow near the core where the infrastructure is, and then you slowly grow out from there as the infrastructure expands. It seems to look better, work better in pictures than it does in reality. They've got some images up here, as you can see, just from 1984 to today, what Mount Pleasant looks like in North Mount Pleasant. Some of you might be familiar with that, so I want to pull that out. So the way I always couch it is, once you know the growth is going to occur, the question then is, how do you want to regard that growth? You want to be deliberate about it. You want to be fiscally sound with regard to how you manage that growth or approve that growth. It's coming. The question then is, where will it go and how will it be managed? So the zoning code that we're working on, the UDO, and by the way, Unified Development Ordinance, all that means is it's a consolidation of the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance into one document. So that's pretty common now. That's all that means. This is an outline for the new ordinance that we've developed. We're doing this in 4 different modules. The first module is introduction to zoning districts and use regulations. And we're wrapping up our staff draft for that in the next couple of weeks, and hope to be rolling that out to the public towards the end of the year. And then we'll take on these other items, as you can see there. Kelly Cousineau, who I mentioned is our project manager for this project, was here before the council a few weeks ago, and was meeting as the committee as a whole, and went over some of the issues in these zoning districts, in land use table issues. They looked at commercial corridors. How do you want your commercial corridors to look? They explored several areas there. Looked at the zoning districts. We're not looking at a lot of new zoning districts, but maybe consolidating a few. That's something that we look at as part of Module 1. Look at density. What are the densities that are desired? How to measure density, whether it's net or gross. Types of features that have to be in new subdivisions. we look at use tables, and I always want to update these as we go along. There always seem to be new types of uses emerging, microbreweries, we didn't know what those were 10 years ago, wineries, these sorts of things, or short-term rentals, number of uses that tend to be emerging, and we always want to cover those and discuss those with clients when we're updating the code. So that's all part of this exercise. As Jason mentioned, and as you well know, there are three distinct, or relatively distinct parts of the county here. There's the way you're oriented up in North Carolina, and the Charlotte area, the Panhandle, the greater Lancaster area, and southern Lancaster County. When we get into the development standards, that'll be more in Module 2. You may start seeing some distinctions here. So for example, parking standards might be different in Panhandle versus southern Lancaster County, paving standards, other kinds of design features, buffer yards, setbacks. One thing that was told to us when we took on this project, some of you may know that the UDO that we have now was adopted in 2016. Not that old of an ordinance. One of the challenges with the current ordinance is it wasn't tailored very well in some regard to Lancaster County and didn't do as good a job of maybe reflecting some of the unique aspects of different parts of the county. So when we get to those design and site development standards, you'll see some distinctions, probably geographically across the county. As I said, we'll be wrapping up Module 1, hopefully around the end of this year, and then in the winter and spring getting into Module 2 and 3 in the summer, and then wrapping up in the fall of next year, and then going into adoption in the latter part of next year or the early part of 2024. What you can expect, and I'll point this out just because we're coming up on the end of Module 1, is that for each one, we hold a council workshop. As I mentioned, we held the council workshop for Module 1 in September. That's where we're in the process of drafting. We check in with the council. Are we doing the right thing? We need a little guidance here. Does this sound like we're giving you what you envision? We finalize that draft, give it to staff. Then we finalize the second draft, and then we take that to a day of public outreach that will include the UDO subcommittee, planning commission, the council, and a public input session. And again, I would expect sometime around the end of the year, beginning of next year, to be doing that for Model 1. And with that, I will close, and we're going to take questions after everybody presents.
Yeah. John's next. I just want to say something real quick. Lancaster County has not elongated and stretched. There's a little bit of a display issue from the computer to the projector, so sorry about that. Some of the graphics are skewed a little bit. Just wanted you to know that.
Good evening. I'm John Hardy with Lennar. I do land acquisition, which is the most fun you can possibly have in the home building and development industry. Prior to the role as land acquisition VP, I was division president for Lennar here in Charlotte. Prior to that, Pulte here in Charlotte, and then Ryland Homes here in Charlotte. So I have a lot of time here. I've been in the market for 33 years, and I've been fortunate to have enjoyed some of the most fun communities being built and developed in my career here in Lancaster County. With the largest one, Sun City, the first production building here in the county, Claremont off of 160, and then what I consider to be one of the most fun was Treetops with the prior use that was there and trying to keep as much authenticity as possible as we developed and built that out. So I was asked to talk a little bit about trends in home building. And certainly I can answer any questions toward the end. But one of the things I wanted to pull up. Yes. So the next most interesting community I'm going to be involved in is Roseland, which many of you know about. It's across from the old prior Oasis, just north of the city. On the left-hand side as you go out, it's 1,860 home sites. It'll have our county's large regional park, 84 acres, and it'll have 140 acres of commercial out front. So really a center of, rather a hub of activity for the future. And I was at the council meeting on Monday night, and what's really interesting is to see what is being done from a land planning perspective on the county park. And it just goes to show that when we as residents, and I live here, I've lived in Lancaster County since '07, when we come together and we pass bonds for recreational facilities, we get something really interesting with it. So it's fun to be a part of all that. But trends in home building, trends in community development, and then future trends as to where you may see home building going in the near future in the next 4 to 5 years. Trends from a home perspective, you know, many of you experience this in your own home, but what we're seeing are probably 6 or 7 trends that have been around for probably 5 or 6 years that continue to be top of mind when we're designing homes, when architects design homes, and when you and other folks purchase homes. The first and most important thing we're seeing today is the open concept of living. Those of you that may be familiar with Sun City and the open concept ranches we designed years ago, it's really infiltrated down into that first time and second time move-up buyer as well, where you want to see across the back, primarily across the back, you want to see the kitchen, the living room, and the dining area all as one large gathering area where folks can interact, where the person that is cooking, husband or wife that's cooking, can interact with children or family that's in there for entertaining very easily between kitchen. It's almost like that perfect triangle of kitchen, dining, family room that we're seeing in that open concept. In addition, we're seeing, especially since the pandemic first started, that dedicated office space where the husband or the wife can work from home, either full-time or part-time working from home, and they have that area where they can get away and really just work, whether it's 8 or 10 hours a day. I've been fortunate, I don't have to go back to an office. I have an office in my home now over the last 2 years. And literally, I can shut myself in that room for 8 hours a day, and sometimes it's 10 or 12, and work. And that dedicated office space has become extremely popular with first time, second time, and retirees, as we're seeing right now. 57% of all the retirees that are living in active adult communities are still working in some way, in some fashion. So it's been a very interesting trend to see. Another big thing that we're seeing is the outdoor living, and how for 9 months a year in our climate, outdoor living with fireplaces, fire pits, grilling islands, and just expanded patio spaces have become extremely popular. And how folks can interact from inside that kitchen in through the dining area into the outdoor space for 9 months a year has become extremely popular. Gourmet kitchens with double ovens and microwaves, granite countertops are special. And then oversized pantries and storage. In our area, as many of you know, you don't see many basements being built. So as builders, we're having to go up and over the garage with storage areas and pull down stairs. And we're having to floor over some floor trussing that's up there so that people have room to store. Many of you have seen it where people can't park in their garages because they have so many things that they collect, right? I mean, I'm guilty. Storage has become extremely important. From a community perspective, we are seeing what used to be the chief 2 amenities of streetlights and sidewalks, as many of us grew up. That was our amenity. Now we're seeing pools and cabanas and clubhouses and trail systems and pickleball courts and tennis courts, because we're seeing folks that want to have a more active lifestyle. And that's the largest trend that we've seen happen in our county over the last 20 years, is the need to satisfy those folks that want an active lifestyle. So we're seeing the home change, but more importantly, we're seeing the community itself change dramatically. From 70-foot, 80-foot, and 90-foot wide home sites, and in some cases, acre and 2 acre home sites, to 40, 50, and 60-foot wide home sites. So, and a lot of people don't like that. They don't like the small lots. However, I do want to make sure that we hear what the consumer wants, and the consumer wants more time for entertainment and to enjoy their life and their lifestyle, and they want less maintenance. So they want smaller lots with fully maintained homes, fully maintained lots, and well-maintained homes with less things that they have to do, like paint and take care of those things. So those are some of the trends we're seeing from a community perspective. Lastly, home builders and developers are following the spokes of the wheel. And if you think about Charlotte as the center, the hub of the wheel, and you think about, you know, I-77 going north and south, and I-85 going from northeast to southwest, you know, connecting Raleigh all the way to Birmingham, Alabama, and then you see I-40 coming across the top of our map, and 321 coming down the left side of our map, going from Chester County all the way to the mountains, and then Highway 9 coming across the bottom, and 601 up the right. Anything within that square, anything within, any spoke within that square is where we as developers want to be. Not because we think it's the right thing to do, but because the consumer is telling us that's where they want to be. So we're trying to listen and say, okay, they want to be within a 40 to 45-minute ride of Charlotte, and they want to be on a spoke of a wheel with good transportation, good shopping, good schools, etc. So we're following the spokes of the wheel. Highway 521, when I built Sun City, was following the spoke of the wheel. And it was a 4-lane highway that had very little to do, and I could get from Highway 521 to downtown Lancaster here in 20 minutes doing 80 miles an hour. Today I can't do that. It takes me an hour and 15 minutes from the same spot to get there, and I have, I don't know, 18 stoplights or something like that. I live here, so I'm not complaining. So that's what we're seeing from a community perspective. We're going to be going out on Highway 9, all from Chester, which we have a deal on Highway 9 in Chester, to Highway 9 all the way into Pageland. We're looking, we have things under contract because the demand is here, not because we want to come in and just develop and think that the consumer is going to come. No, the consumer wants to be here, so we're meeting a demand. So, having said that, I think I'm probably a wrap. I don't know if I took too long, but I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. I just wanted to talk about some trends that you'll see. Thank you.
I'm Brady Bucy with Lancaster County Water and Sewer District. Glad to be here. I've got a slideshow I'm going to go through pretty quickly, and then we can entertain questions later. Roles and responsibilities. In Lancaster County, we are a special purpose district within Lancaster County. It's the Water and Sewer District. Lancaster County is responsible for legislating growth throughout the county and unincorporated areas. DHEC, of course, regulates the permitting of our publicly owned treatment facilities. We are the stewards of the water and sewer in the county. So it's not our intent to control growth. It's our intent to facilitate the need for growth. And our mission is to provide a sustainable, keyword sustainable, quality water and quantity of water in the future. So the catalyst for growth, though, as John mentioned, we're in a attractive region. We're near Charlotte, we've got an attractive region, we've got available land, and if you take those two things and you have available water and the key thing being sewer, you're going to have growth. So although we don't like to be the catalyst, or we don't like to be the catalyst of growth, the county controls growth, a lot of times we are the ones that facilitate growth because sewer is what people look for. They're looking for a certain region, they're looking for available land, and sewer is the utility that's the catalyst for growth. As it goes to water and sewer capacity, Lancaster County is in a really good place in regards to where we're at compared to, you look at neighboring counties like Union County, North Carolina, Cabarrus County, North Carolina, you see and county governments don't usually get along, much less the way everybody does in Lancaster County. So we're going to talk a little more about capacity, opportunities in front of us, but also some key challenges in front of us. So when we look at the county, we don't look exactly at the regions that Jason does. We have the pink area up at the top is our Indian land. We have a treatment plant there, our Indian land wastewater treatment plant on River Road. So when we do basin analysis, capacity analysis, we look at these areas. The purple area, we depend on the city of Lancaster as the supply of treatment for there. So that's a collaborative effort that we depend upon the city. The rest of the areas to the right of 522 over on the right side of the county are in the Lynch's River Basin, so we treat them separately. So within these areas, Indian land, we take these areas and we break them down and we break them into sub-basins and we do population projections and then we do build outs to figure out how much capacity we're going to need in the next 5, 10, 20 years, and ultimately build out so we design our infrastructure. So there's a process to it. Here you can see the rest of the county around the city of Lancaster, where we've done the same thing in the past. And so, and ultimately we come up with these numbers. So we have current allocations, we have our available capacity. In Indian land, for example, we have an NPDES permit, which will allow us to treat flows up to 15 million gallons a day. So with all the growth you see up there, we've got allocations right now of about 7.5 million. So we can grow from 7.5 up to 15 MGD, and that would last about a 20-year window. In the city of Lancaster, we only have 1.5 MGD of capacity at the city's plant. They have worked with us and given us 2.8 MGD of capacity, and we're in the process, a collaborative effort with the city to do an expansion to the permit to put it back into the river that would take us up to a total of 15 MGD and would give us the available capacity for the next 20 years. This is our treatment plant in Indian land off River Road. You can see the investment in the future that we've done here. This concrete basin that you see is the size of a football field in length, and it's 10 yards deep, so it's quite a massive concrete structure. That will handle 10 MGD. What you see there right now is rated as a 5 MGD facility, and in the future we can come out towards the road and we can put 2 more of those chambers, which would take it to a 15 MGD facility. It's really a beautiful facility. We got all that done right before costs really went up. This is our water plant. You can see the top river on the left-hand side. We've got 1 billion gallons of reservoir storage. This is off Highway 5 and Riverside Road. We've got a 40 MGD facility there that we, again, collaborate with Union County, North Carolina. It's been a great multi-state, multi-county effort. So challenges. With regards to managing wastewater allocations, there are challenges. Part of my purpose is to create awareness among county leaders, economic development, and residential developers of the challenges related to sewer service in the area. The Catawba River, the section that we are on, is currently, we are evaluating what's called a TMDL for nutrients. Nutrients being phosphorus, nitrogen, chlorophyll. Neighboring counties are nearing their existing permanent capacities, like we said. Lancaster County is working on the new comprehensive plan, and the city of Lancaster is working on expanding an NPDES permit. These all things work together, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more why. Nutrients. What do we mean by nutrients? When I talk about nutrients, wastewater, nutrients, and water. Nutrients are basically phosphorus and your nitrogen, things that go in your fertilizer, right? So we are limited on the Catawba River how much nutrients we can put back into the river because it's an impaired water body in that section. Everything comes out of the mountains, it comes into the Piedmont, it gets down here into the sand hills, and it's like a truck ramp. Everything spreads out, the water gets real shallow, and so the sunlight hits the nutrients, plants need nutrients to grow, and you create algae blooms and plant growth and things like that. So we're limited what we can put back into the river. we're talking about nutrient limited. In 2004, after they decided that this portion of the Untitled River from Lake Wiley to Lake Wateree was an impaired section, they said, nobody gets any more nutrients. You get what you got right now. So we got basically what amounts to a half a bag, less than a half a bag of fertilizer, 16 pounds. Every day we can put a half a bag of fertilizer back in the river. City of Lancaster has 45 pounds, so they got a little over a 40-pound bag of fertilizer. City of Charlotte's got 20 bags of fertilizer. So as we move forward with growth, we'll never have more than that third of a pound bag of fertilizer. In fact, EPA through this process is looking to cut our bag. So we can grow all we want, but we're only going to have this little bag that we can put back in the river. And so ultimately we hope to bubble share with Rock Hill and City of Lancaster and other groups in the area, but we're limited in terms of how much nutrients that we're allowed to put in the river. So what does that mean? It means more cost. If I got to take all this out of the wastewater and put it back in, it's going to be cost. So why don't you just spend more money, right? And spend more money. Make our rates a little bit higher, we can stand that. But the best available technology out there will only take you down so far. So as you grow, you're limited of how much you can get that level of treatment. So there are limits to the technology that's available now. Public trust is essential in the water and sewer business, never more so than today. Whether it's Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, or Denmark, South Carolina, people have to trust that they're meeting the regulatory constraints out there. There just is no exception. So we have to know that we can meet the limits that the EPA sets for us. So these constraints are real, and they will become more apparent over the next 5-10 years as we learn more about the TMDL process. So where do these nutrients come from? Stormwater runoff primarily from residential and agricultural development. Everybody's fertilizing their yard right now to get the fescue growing. All right, you have a big rain come up, well, it's in the creek. You're putting a lot more than my half a bag of fertilizer in the creek, right? Because the rain just came. But, you know, those things don't get regulated like we get regulated. So it comes from industrial processes. It also comes from domestic wastewater from households. So they regulate. Human waste has nutrients in it. Household detergents have nutrients in it. And we're the most highly regulated. We're the easiest to regulate because in that process, you can also regulate growth to some extent. So what does that mean in terms of regulatory demands? Well, when we try to get new permits, the EPA, DHEC, special interest groups are going to say, what are you going to do to mitigate these things? What are you going to do to prevent cumulative effects from growth? So we have to be prepared to answer those questions. But we don't control growth in the county. So we need to work with Lancaster County in order to incorporate things into permits so we can explain to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, so we can explain to South Carolina DNR that we are doing these things in Lancaster County to reduce the amount of nutrients that are being put into the system. And that's where we need that collaborative effort with Lancaster County. So it's better to be proactive, not reactive. You know, we don't want to get into the process, all of a sudden we're getting up near our point, we need more capacity from DHEC. They're going to say, you got to slow this thing down. We got to study this. This is going to be a 5 or 10 year process. Then you're on a moratorium and then nobody grows anywhere. So now is the time to make these changes so that when they look at what does Lancaster County do, we have things in place. So what are those things? Riparian buffers are one of the most important things. It's the best thing to use as a filter to keep nutrients out of the river. Enhanced stormwater measures, encourage conservation through rates and policies, those types of things. But the opportunity is now through a collaborative effort with the county to get these things in place. What do we not want? Don't want to be critical. This is a development that was on Bishop Creek Reservoir. This was approved in Lancaster County more than 20 years ago, more than we knew this section of the Untitled River was an impaired water body. But this is not what we want. We want riparian buffers on the river. We want riparian buffers on the lakes. How do we want to balance? It's a balancing act of nutrients, okay? Everybody knows the spider lilies, beautiful thing in Lancaster Canal. They love nutrients. It's like a steak dinner to them. Phosphorus, nitrogen, growing flowers, everybody's happy, right? But too much nutrients and we get algae blooms. This is a clip from a Columbia news station from 2019, identifying Lake Wateree as the only South Carolina lake with a harmful algal bloom at that time. So it's a balancing act. We need nutrients, we don't need too many of them. So again, we have the capacity to meet the growth needs for the next 20 years. Beyond that, that's a separate analysis, but we do have the capacity, but we need to be smart, and the time is now to make good decisions on it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bryan Vaughn. I'm with the Lancaster County School District. Growth is really one of the topics that's probably at the forefront of what we're dealing with every day in the school system. Having been here in the county and been with the school district for 29 years, it's been really interesting to see how we've changed and transformed over the years. And we went from, if you go back 25 years ago, or even 29 years ago when I came here to Lancaster County, Lancaster High School, which is just a mile away from here, it had 2,000 kids, and it was one of the biggest schools in this whole region. Today, Lancaster High School has 1,400 kids, and we have seen sort of a shifting of our population from certain areas to other more rural areas. But in general for us, and the population has been very, for the most part, stable throughout the county in regards to school populations, with the exception of above Highway 5. And I'll give you this illustration. When I came here 30 years ago, Indiana High School had 300 kids in its high school, 300 kids. Today, it's a high school of 1,700. If you look at the schools that are above Highway 5, basically what you're dealing with is you have Van Wyck, you have Indiana Elementary, Harrisburg Elementary. All three of those elementary schools, particularly Indiana Elementary and Harrisburg Elementary, both of those schools are almost 1,100 kids. 1,100 kids. That's a lot of children in an elementary setting. To show you an illustration of how growth and the population boom in Lancaster County has really impacted us, you take Harrisburg. Harrisburg is a perfect case study of what population growth and density does to a school setting. Our attendance zone there basically is 160, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Indiana area, but 160 is the road that cuts off 521 and goes to Fort Mill. Well, we drew the attendance boundaries about 9 years ago when we built Harrisburg. And those boundaries were set at basically north 160 all the way to the state line would be the population base for Harrisburg Elementary School. It's a pretty small area. I mean, pretty much you have one thoroughfare that goes through there. It's basically Harrisburg Road. And then you have Barberville Road, and then that's pretty much it. Today, that population, the way it sits, we've got almost 1,100 kids in that small section. And that's just 1,100 kids for one elementary school. That's not taking into account the number of kids that come from that area that go to the intermediate school, that go to the middle school, and then ultimately go to the high school. So if you look at our population, when we come in here today and talk about how population affects us in the school system, I'd be the first to tell you, when we talk about the growth around the Lancaster area, naturally, we think, we believe that the development, as I already referred to, it's going to be a great development. It's going to be a great thing for Lancaster, in the Lancaster area. We feel pretty comfortable about accommodating growth in the Lancaster area. We've got space at Lancaster High School. We've got space at AR Road. North Elementary School, we may have to do some things there to help with the population boom. But really, the focal point, though, for our county and our school district as far as growth goes, is really that 521 corridor from Van Wyck all the way to the state line. That's where we're really feeling the effects. Every school along that corridor is at 1,000 kids or more. And what we're feeling as a school district is really, we're feeling the pinch. Because what's happening there is we need land. We need big parcels of land to plan our future schools. Because at the end of the day, to build an elementary school, you have 30 acres of land, minimum. And so to find 30 acres now in any one area is extremely difficult. And we've been looking for 2 years to try to find the right parcel. And a lot of things go into it. We have to look at the roads put on. Does it have access to water, sewer? What's the population? How's it going to affect the surrounding area? And so growth is playing a huge role in how we operate as a school district going forward. One of the things I think that growth has impacted us in is because we've had to have such big schools, it's created transportation flows. And anybody that's traveled in the Indian area, I'm not telling you anything that's not new. We don't have a large rent system there. And because most of our land from the school system was bought, for instance, the Indian Land Complex, we have 3 schools that sit on a block between Davis Ridge Road, River Road, and 521. And in that area, we've got almost 4,000 kids. With 30 staff members, 5,000 people that are coming to that location every day, multiple times a day, multiple trips with buses and parents. And what we've seen is unfortunately, in the Indian area, different from other areas of the county. If you look at patterns of growth in places like Charlotte or North County or Union County, usually when you build a school, you can fan out. You can pull from this area, you can pull from this area, you can pull from this area, you can pull from this area. We're at a real disadvantage in the Panhandle area because the Panhandle is like this. Literally, what growth has done to us and what it's done to that area of the county in a lot of ways is 521 is the lifeblood of Lancaster County. And not only do you have the people that live there that commute, you have all the people from the Lancaster area, Beaufort area, Kershaw area that commute. But literally, one wreck can shut down a roadway, and that can be the difference between getting 2 or 3 schools home in the afternoon with transportation. So, we're facing a lot of challenges in regard to the growth. I think that going forward, if you don't take away anything from what I've said tonight, the one thing I hope folks will understand is, having been here to serve this county in a lot of different capacities for a long time, I understand that it's very difficult if you live in one part of the county and you see growth in another area and you think it may not connect to you or have an impact on you. But everything that we do in the school system is interrelated. And one thing that is a great concern for us going forward is with growth, you have to fund schools. You have to be able to fund land. You have to be able to fund facilities. And one of the things that has really come to light for us, and we're really at a crossroads, because right now, you take Van Wyck Elementary School, which is really outside of Indian Land High School. It's our newest elementary school. When it was built 5 years ago, it cost about $18 million to build. That same school would cost about $35 million today to build 5 years later. And so, for us, not only are we concerned about growth and building and having schools at capacity, but we're concerned about where are we going to put those kids, and how are we going to build those schools? Because it is a more difficult equation to navigate in Lancaster County than, say, a Fort Mill. Because we have a big county compared to some places like a Rocky Hill 3, that's a smaller portion of, say, York County or Fort Mill. I mean, we go all the way from the tip almost to Pineville Mall, all the way to Kershaw, which is almost 50-mile stretch. And so growth is something that we're wrestling with every single day, and something that, you know, is on our minds, and something we're dealing with. And I would also tell folks is that, you know, the bigger the school, the more difficult it is to manage. You know, it's difficult to manage from a standpoint of transportation, safety, discipline, you know, communication, all of those things. I mean, most school districts, you may have a large high school, you may have a couple of large high schools, but you don't have typically a whole cluster of elementary schools that are at 1,000 or 1,100 or 1,200 kids. And so that's our challenge. Our challenge is to get away from those larger schools and to be able to spread and disperse that population out. And for us to do that, it's going to be very difficult going forward, to be quite honest with you. The other thing that I think is real important to remember about growth is that, you know, I think for us, managing it is not only, you know, tough on a daily basis, but just the future planning of growth. Because right now, unfortunately, the growth in the Panhandle area, and this may change somewhat in the near future with interest rates going up and things like that, but we've been gaining such a large population at such a quick pace. I mean, some of our schools have been growing at 10% a year. And it doesn't take very long if you're growing at 10% clip to double that population. And so, you know, what we're looking at future-wise right now, we're looking at an additional elementary school, which is greatly needed. We're looking at a second middle school. And one thing I'd point out, when I gave you those numbers about elementary schools, those aren't traditional elementary schools. Those are K-4 schools. We've got an intermediate school that houses 5 or 6. It's well over 1,000 kids too. So again, those are the challenges that we're going to be facing. And not only has growth affected us just from a space, traffic, you know, service aspect, it's affecting the way we deliver education to kids. You know, we have done pretty well with our budget process to be able to put teachers in classrooms. The problem is, in some of our elementary schools, we have a 1-to-28 ratio, not because we don't have teachers to go in those classrooms, but because we don't have classrooms to put those teachers. And so it's pushed those numbers up. So growth has had a bunch of different effects on us. You know, and I'll be the first one to tell you that, you know, I think that, you know, just from a traffic standpoint, it's frustrating. I know it's frustrating for people. It's frustrating for commuters. It's frustrating for parents. It's frustrating for people that live in the area. No one wants to sit through a cycle 4 or 5 times to be able to make a left turn in the mornings. I get it. But I think what we're going to have to do is, I mean, we didn't get into this overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. You know, I think that what we're going to have to do is find ways, you know, to acquire land and find funding mechanisms to build more schools. Because ultimately, even if the faucet were turned out today, if it were turned off today, just the number of homes that are being built, we're going to be dealing with this for many, many years to come. But I look forward to answering any questions that you guys might have. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ben Levine. I apologize, I don't have any fancy slides, but me better now? Thank you. So yes, I don't have another PowerPoint presentation. As a profession, I'm an electrical engineering manager, so I do quite a lot on the computer. I'd rather just talk and tell you a little bit about my role in the county and what I do. My name is Levine. I'm the Planning Commission member from what previously was District 7, now District 4. I joined the Planning Commission about 5 years ago, mainly just because I had a big interest in what was being built around me and how it was being developed and what was going on. It just felt like I could potentially have some sort of impact on what we do in the county. Now, just to make sure everybody understands what a Planning Commission member does, it's different than the planning staff. So we don't work for the county. We're just selected by our county council member. And we also don't necessarily approve rezonings for the county. We give a recommendation of approval or denial to county council. And county council then has the ability to rezone the property or not rezone the property. Some of the other items that we take a look at for the county are we would hear text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance, as well as give a recommendation of approval for a new Unified Development Ordinance when that ordinance becomes available. We will hear items like impact fee studies and give a recommendation to county council on impact fee studies. And one of the few things that we actually have the power to vote for or against and have it happen is a preliminary plat for development. So with the process that will usually happen, if you hear about in the paper, it says 1,000 new homes coming to Indian land. It's a pretty common headline that you hear. What the developer is going to do is they're going to come to the county, maybe rezone the property in order to have those 1,000 homes. They're going to come to the Planning Commission. We're going to give a recommendation to County Council. County Council is then going to determine whether they want to rezone for that. And then once they do that, and they can now build those homes on the property, they would come to us with a preliminary plat. And it would show where the different access is going to be, how many houses, how they're going to be laid out. And we would determine within our opinion and the information from planning staff if that meets the requirements. So there's not necessarily, the reason I think why we're not voted, why we're appointed by county council members is because we're not necessarily voting on these items, but we are giving them our impact on, our opinion on what we think that they should do. And just as a resident, that seems to be maybe one of the places I can make the largest impact is trying to determine, where we can make things easier for the citizens of the county, and at the same time balancing the things that we want to come to the county as citizens. So probably been to almost every meeting that I think we've had for the comprehensive plan, and heard a lot of input from people on what we want to see in terms of parks, recreation, shopping, just all kinds of items that people want to see. And a lot of those items that people want to see, what comes with it is this growth and how we manage it. So what a lot of people might not realize is we're trying to manage all this growth while at the same time, the county does not necessarily want to add roads and mileage of roads that they have to take care of. So if you're in a new development in the last few years, chances are your development owns those roads and you pay to take care of them. So it's just one of those items that is another squeeze on the county. How does the county manage to add all these things while at the same time not bringing on a bunch of an extra cost? So what you will have a lot of times is a developer coming in, and maybe part of their development is that they have the thread trail or the walking trails come through their property, and so what they will be required to do is to develop that trail, and then that trail will be deeded over to the county. The county will maintain it. So the main reason why, the main reason why I think I was nominated for the Comprehensive Plan Board to give feedback was because of future use. So when you talk about future land use, this is where we're looking at this as part of the comprehensive plan and deciding what makes sense for the future use of particular properties, and how do you identify what does make sense. For us, would we hear the next rezoning that comes for 1,000 homes or for a giant retail establishment? What we're going to get from the county staff is going to be a bunch of advice from their input on the results of the traffic impact analysis, what the any feedback from the stormwater department. As you change the use of the property, you might add more impervious surface, and now the rainfall that was going to fall there doesn't go to the soil, it falls off the property onto the one next to it. And if anybody here is from Indian Land, you know that while we've had the growth, you still have a lot of smaller houses off the street, and they're running on these old culverts to get into their driveway. And as soon as they start getting a little bit more water on their property, now they might not be able to make it up their driveway. So, what is the impact of adding all this development? But future land use is really the most important thing. The item that always comes up is this rezoning consistent with the future land use of the area? And that's one area where I really want to make sure that at the end of this comprehensive plan we identify what really does make sense for the area, whether it's up in Indian Land or whether it's further south in the county. Because when we want to make a decision on what makes sense to go either next to your house or next to your place of business, what really is the best plan there? There's only a few other times other than these large comprehensive plan reanalysis every 10 years or so, where we have a chance to do something like that, and that's a small area plan. So in the last few years, we had a Southern Panhandle small area plan where we got to take a look at what's going on in the southern part of 521, where we might be able to manage what goes on instead of maybe having the same thing happen that happened to the northern part of 521. So it's very important. A lot of people will want to come out for a public hearing when you hear about some rezoning for 1,000 homes or for an industrial plant. But the most important time actually to get your feedback is in right now. Because what happens right now is we're going to determine what the future land use is for the next 10 years. So whenever we hear something come, this is when we want to really have a good idea about what we want to do as a county in those areas. So I appreciate it. If you have any questions, look forward to hearing them afterwards. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rox Burhans, and I am the Development Services Director for Lancaster County. I also serve as the Planning Director. It's kind of a dual role that the county has set up for myself. Before I jump into my presentation, I just want to say thank you for everyone looking out into the audience and seeing tonight. And thank you. I know you probably have other things you could be doing, spending time with friends and family. I was looking at my phone, there's actually some good football games on tonight if you're a college football fan. So I just want to say thank you and extend the same thing to you to my fellow panelists. The same is true. There's other things that we could be doing, but I can tell that there's a lot of concern and care about our community, and that's why we're all here together to talk about these important topics. So just want to say that, open that up with a thank you. So my presentation, I want to kind of cover two things. One, I'd like to introduce the Development Services Division to you if you're not familiar with that division and what we do and the role we play with growth. I want to cover that briefly. And then I'd like to cover just some facts and maybe some opinions or thoughts on on the county as a whole, as well as some of those sub-areas that you've heard other panelists talk about and how we're organizing the county into these three sub-areas, the Panhandle, the greater Lancaster area, and the southern Lancaster area, and just kind of share some more information about that. And I'd love to take some questions afterwards if we can help you provide more information to you. So let's go ahead and start with that overview of the Development Services Division. So what is it? So Development Services Division is really made up of 4 individual departments that serves as sort of the organizer and facilitator of reviewing growth and development applications and requests. And so that might include something like from our zoning department or our zoning office. And what they do is when you want to build a house, they make sure that the house is meeting the proper setbacks and has the proper height. If you're building a new drugstore, making sure that it meets required parking. If you're moving into an existing building space, they make sure that business is allowed to be in that space and the use is permitted. So they're really on the ground every day working with not only the home builders like Mr. Hardy, but also business owners, helping ensure that businesses are located in the right locations and meeting the right standards. You've also heard mention of our stormwater department. They play a critical role. As Ben talked very well about, when it rains, the water doesn't necessarily go into the ground anymore because there's a house there or a driveway or a parking lot. And so that water drains into ditches or pipes and then later on into creeks and later on most likely into the top of the river. And so we need to make sure that that water is managed in a way that doesn't create flooding or impacts to adjacent properties, but also gets returned to the creeks or to the river in as clean of a condition as possible. And so that's it's a great responsibility that they have, but it's one that they do very well and work very hard and are passionate about. You also have the building department. This is probably the department you may have the most contact with. It's sort of making sure that when a building is constructed, that it meets the proper life safety codes, that building is going to be safe and sound for you in perpetuity, as well as for commercial buildings. And finally, we have the planning department, which I actually also serve as, I mentioned earlier, the department director. And we kind of see ourselves as sort of like the glue, if you will, for all the departments within development services. One of the things we do is help facilitate these long-range studies, like comprehensive plans. You heard a small discussion about smaller, more focused plans from Mr. Levine. We facilitate and manage these, and sometimes we initiate them ourselves. But also, we're just responsible in reviewing individual rezoning applications and managing the subdivision activity in the county. And so, as you can see, we all play a really important role in helping manage growth in the county, making sure it happens in a orderly manner and meets appropriate standards. And so, we're all equally important in considering ourselves the Fantastic Four as it relates to growth and development. So, be happy to talk more about what we do with questions later on. So let's go ahead and jump into kind of an overview of the county. So one of some quick facts about the county is we're actually a really large county. We span approximately 550 square miles. If you didn't know, that's really big. And so I was looking to find some comparables, and I found that we're half the size of Rhode Island. Think about that. We're half the size of Rhode Island. And that is our community. And our population is right now a little over 100,000 in total. And that maybe doesn't seem like such a big number for such a large area, again, for half of Rhode Island. But what I want you to think about is, and you've heard this from other panelists, is about the rate of growth. Let's look at these numbers. In 2000, we were a little over 61,000. In 2010, we were almost 77,000. And so when you look at those growth rates, over the past 20 years, we've grown 64%, 30% in the last 10 years. So it's that rate of change that I think is the most, the biggest figure to kind of hone in on versus the total number. And just in 2021, we permitted over 1,200 homes. And that actually, if you look at the trend, the overall trends for Lancaster County, that's actually kind of on the lower side. We've actually been hitting 1,400 for many years, and most of those homes are actually in the Panhandle area that I'll talk a little bit more about. And so again, before I jump in to the individual sub-areas, this map here on the right shows you where we have chosen to draw these boundaries to help organize the plan for Lancaster County, recognizing it's so large and diverse. One plan can't satisfy all of the areas and all of the unique demands for it. So we identified the Panhandle area, it's a unique area. We identified another area called Greater Lancaster, which is centered around the city of Lancaster. And then we have the Southern Lancaster, which includes East Springs and Kershaw. And so we felt that we just couldn't develop one plan to meet all the needs. And so we're going to develop 3 individual plans to help address unique issues. So let's kind of jump into the Panhandle because that's where a lot of discussions happen. Going back to the 2020 decennial census, you have a population of around 41,000 individuals. And if you look back at 2010, that population was a doubling of the population when we were around 20,000 population. Again, the numbers themselves may not seem so big, but it's the rate of change and pace of growth is something I think that needs the most amount of attention here. Pulled some numbers, and actually I shared these with our county council yesterday in a workshop. we have, so when the word entitled, I want to explain it to you since not all of you may work in it with development. When a property is rezoned for a specific project or a subdivision is approved for a certain number of lots, we call that entitled. It means that the property owner or the developer has the ability to develop the property for X number of lots or X number of buildings. They just haven't built it yet. And so it's legally entitled, but just not built yet. And so when we dig into our permitting records, what we found is, as of today, we have approximately 5,550 single-family home lots and townhome lots that are entitled and can be legally built, largely in the Panhandle area and including with the Roseland project that Mr. Hardy mentioned. So that's a large number of lots that can be built. And that assumes that everything just stopped today. You can still build that many homes in the northern parts of our community. In terms of looking at apartments and other types of multifamily dwellings, we have 2,756 units that have the legal right to be built that just haven't been built yet in the community. And again, the vast majority of those are in the Panhandle, or actually probably exclusively in the Panhandle area of the county. That's a very high number. We had 2 rezonings in September where the council approved two apartment communities, roughly around 600 dwelling units in both of those communities. And so with that, we actually dug in recently. How many apartments do we have in the Panhandle area? Not only built, but again, permitted, under construction, entitled. And where the number we calculated was approximately 5,100 apartments are either built and occupied and people are living in them. They're either under construction. You've probably seen the Vantage apartments at near Van Wyck and 521, and there's another apartment community in the Old Bales area. And then there's again the entitled lots that are the entitled apartments that are legally possible. They just haven't been started yet. And so again, these are really high numbers, and so we wanted to be familiar with them and see how best to help guide growth and recognition of these. So with this rapid growth, there's some really logical community issues that we're seeing coming about with this. We're seeing traffic congestion. I think every panelist has talked about traffic in some way. We just got done hearing about school crowding, particularly in Indian Land Association. Yes, we recognize that there is school crowding. There's concerns about fire protection. We're building these apartment communities and other developments. Do we have our fire protection services are largely volunteer-based. Do we have the right facilities and number of personnel capable of serving that? And also just kind of in the Panhandle concerns that I've heard. I should have started this. I've been in the county about 2.5 years, but I've lived and worked as a planner in the South Charlotte area for probably 20 plus years. I was using my fingers to count how many, but there's been concerns about community identity and character in the Panhandle area. My common term I hear is hodgepodge. There's just a lot of hodgepodge without a lot of identity. And you're starting to see that, and so I think part of this planning effort is to try to help give us a better long-range plan so we can not exacerbate these issues and start actually helping solve some of these issues for the long term, because these are very important to the well-being of the community. So let's talk about what I think might be one of the most interesting parts of our community, which is the greater Lancaster area. So again, the greater Lancaster area, as it relates to the comprehensive plan, is this area around the city limits of Lancaster. And historically, this was the growth center of the county. This is where the jobs were here in the city limits. This is where the commerce was. If you wanted to go shopping, you came to the city of Lancaster. But then, over time, like a lot of communities in the South, with the closing of the textile mills, that was a major employer here. And so that obviously had a negative effect on the community that you can still see today. And so, the greater Lancaster area, if you look at it from a trend standpoint, it's had its ups and downs with population growth and decline. And so that is very unique when you compare it to the Panhandle area. So kind of looking ahead, this is kind of where I get into more of the opinion piece. You heard Mr. Hardy talk about the Roseland subdivision, which is near US 521 in North Corner. It's probably actually about a half mile, maybe more, south of North Corner. That's the closest kind of crossroads, if you will. With the Roseland project, which has over 1,800 homes, they extended the sewer system from the Lancaster treatment plant all the way to or they're in the process of doing it all the way to the service off that sewer line. And so, I think that what you're going to see, just me thinking, is like, and this isn't any great thoughts, I think that other people have the same opinions, is that this greater Lancaster area is going to be really set up for a lot of our future growth in the next 10 or 20 years. Parallel to that, you have the city of Lancaster, which is actually very active, in wanting to support residential growth. They're trying to bring the population back to the city. They want to build their tax base, all reasonable things. And what I think you could possibly see is, I think when I first came here, and maybe certainly probably before, everyone, the focus has always been on the Panhandle. That's where people are moving to. That's where the new shopping centers are opening up. That's where the new office parks or buildings are opening up. And that was sort of like the new center of commerce and other activities in the county. But what I think you could see, you will likely start to see, and this will kind of maybe play out in the planning process, is having two centers in the community. Having a northern center in the Panhandle, and then having a southern center around the city of Lancaster. And I think you can kind of see that in being kind of two areas of growth kind of occurring outward from them. And so, but with that, there's definitely potential to replicate some of the challenges that we have in Indian land. Going back to those earlier community concerns, hodgepodge development, where it's not master plan, where it's you're not looking at connectivity between adjacent sites, where there's not identity for the community. We heard that the schools are generally in good shape regarding capacity in this area of the community. It was also referenced that could change, and that could change also if this really turns into a magnet for growth. And so I think it's really important for our planning efforts to be mindful of that, and certainly have a strong focus for the Panhandle, but also have a really strong focus for greater Lancaster, because I think this could be the next growth center for the county. And so, and I think it's also important to note that there's been some discussion in the community that if we could get growth to occur outside of the Panhandle, maybe in greater Lancaster or other areas, well, that would be good for the Panhandle. But it doesn't necessarily work that way, because again, as we've heard, 521 is the pipeline. And so growth in the greater Lancaster area is still going to take, those residents are still going to use 521 to get to Charlotte and other destinations. And that's still going to put cars through Indian land. So I don't think we have to understand those relationships and connection points. And so, and there's also, in the greater Lancaster area, some potential for some long-term utility capacity challenges. And I think Brad talked a little bit about that, and the need to kind of expand the treatment plants in Lancaster to handle the likely future growth here. The last sub-area I want to talk about is the one that probably gets the least amount of attention from the media, or just when we talk about growth, is southern Lancaster. Again, this is the area around East Springs and Kershaw. It's also home to the Hale Gold Mine. For those that don't know, Hale Gold Mine is the largest mine in the eastern section of the United States. It's massive. If you have not seen it, I encourage you to just even get on Google Earth and look at it, just about the scope of it. And so there is a tremendous amount of charm in that area of the community. It's a very rural. Kershaw, East Springs has that small town character that you may have grew up in or seen. They're definitely representative of that. And when we talk to many residents in that area, they kind of like that. They like the slow pace. They're not wanting the hustle and bustle of the Panhandle or other areas. They kind of just like things the way they're going. And so that's kind of what at least that's what we've kind of heard and have seen ourselves. So kind of looking ahead, it's with this planning effort, is how do we kind of retain and enhance that small town character, make sure that it's still that it still continues and thrives. With that small town character and the slow growth and low population, there's still some concerns though. How do you ensure that this area of the county has proper access to a grocery store? How do you ensure that there's access to health care, and so they don't have to drive many miles or many hours to get basic services? So those are kind of priority areas, I think, with this plan that we're going to kind of explore and see again how this plan can help support those efforts. And there's also not a desire to grow like the Panhandle or like Rock Hill or these other communities. There is the need for more for some more housing. Again, we talked about the Hale Gold Mine. That's a large employer. Those employees need want to just kind of wrap up that I hope with this presentation, as well as the other speakers that we've shown, that Lancaster is actually a very diverse area that has unique demands and needs and challenges, and it's not just one size fits all approach. I think, in my opinion, we're fortunate to have these challenges. We could probably get in the car and not drive very far and find communities that they don't have challenges. There's just not a lot going on in them, and I would much rather be in our position than in theirs. And I think there's a potential for great opportunities in our community, but it's going to take efforts like this planning process and really engagement from our citizens and business community to work with the county and to try to help create that better Lancaster. So I again want to thank you again for giving up your evening to participate in this process. I would ask that you please also kind of check in on the comprehensive plan process and don't think this is kind of like a one and done. Stay engaged in the process throughout the next year because we need your support, we need your participation and feedback. So thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions I can help with.
Thank you, Rox, and let's give all the panelists a round of applause. I appreciated having all that knowledge and expertise and sharing a lot about what's going on across the county. And so instead of prepared questions, because of time, I want to turn it over to the audience. So if you have a question, go ahead and, does anybody have a question you want to start with? Sure. Go ahead.
We live in Inland, and we drive up 521. There's very few hours that you can drive up 521 when it's not congested. There's already a large new development going in on 521. To avoid 521, you need to go up Harrisburg Road to Untitled. Now there's at least 5 to 6 new housing developments or apartment buildings going up. And so I'm asking, how many more housing developments, apartment developments are you going to squeeze into Indian land when we don't really have the roads to handle what's there now? Oh, Mr. Levine, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just turn it on.
Yeah, I was kind of sitting there hoping that wasn't for me. No, but it's a great question. And is this the right line? Can you guys hear me?
Can you repeat the question, Jason?
Oh, so the question was specifically about the traffic up in Indian Land and how 521 used to be the preferred route to be able to go north. Now, Harrisburg Road has become the preferred method for what she wants to do, and she sees the development that's going on, the new housing developments that are going on Harrisburg Road. And I will tell you, Harrisburg Road is a very popular place to want to live, and it's not necessarily surprising given the access to South Charlotte, the Pineville area. But just to give a little background on what happens when we hear about someone wanting to create a housing development, either we'll call a neighborhood or subdivision on Harrisburg Road, the very first thing we would hear is that they want to do a rezoning, and if they have a plan for a neighborhood, they'll usually come with what's called a traffic impact analysis. A traffic impact analysis is supposed to determine the difference between adding this neighborhood and not having this neighborhood in a few years, and what that does to the intersections affected by that particular neighborhood. This is all done with math and specific formulas by South Carolina and different groups. And I'm looking at Rox because Rox is the person who would have the most information on those. But they're supposed to tell us what the difference is going to be between not having a development and having a development. And what we've seen over the years is that we get small improvements out of neighborhoods being made. You get a turn lane here, you get some other access somewhere else. But I think that it's definitely also well known that we've seen that all these neighborhoods have gone in, and the traffic hasn't. It's not like the traffic has been fixed back to the same type of flow that it had before. So the difficult part for the Planning Commission is listening to someone's application to want to rezone, looking at the traffic impact analysis and determining if that really shows the full effect of the neighborhood. So ago, I would have said that there wouldn't have been much opposition to hearing or to recommending approval for rezoning for Harrisburg Road. I would definitely say in the last few years, given the number of neighborhoods that have come here, I think most likely the interaction between the developer and the county council or the planning department would probably get, the feedback that that's not necessarily a great idea given the houses that are still left to be developed there. Rox, if you want to, you can feel free to add to that. But yeah, just to say that it's definitely been an area of high growth. You have 7 planning commissioner members and 7 county council members, all from different areas of the county. I live right on Possum Hollow. I can tell you all about the traffic in that area, and I don't really like it. But you have some people who are not from the Indian Land area, and they'll tell you that either they don't think it's real traffic, especially if someone's coming from New Jersey or New York, you have worse traffic than where you came from. But yeah, it's definitely an issue in the area.
I think Ben, you summarized it very well. And the only thing I would add is that, I've been, as I mentioned in my presentation, I've been with the county for roughly 3.5 years. And I think I've seen in that 3.5-year period kind of the beginning of a kind of a change in perspective on looking at growth in the Indian Land Panhandle area. Whereas when I feel like I first came, I think some of the rezonings and subdivisions were occurring rather quickly and in high volume. And I think what I'm seeing now in the last year, plus or minus, is that there's a lot that there seems to be not only with community. I think the community is getting much more aware of the growth. They're feeling it. They're talking about it with their neighbors. I think there's more discussion with our planning commission, and I think there's also more discussion with our county council about how much growth has been approved in that area and what kind of makes sense going forward. And so the only thing I would add to that is I just think there is a much more higher level of focus that at least I've seen in the past year or so. And so I think that you're going to see a rezoning application that receive a lot higher scrutiny. That's my belief. And going forward, recognition of some of the numbers I shared with you, that we have so many units that have been entitled and have yet to be built, and just recognizing some of the growing challenges of the traffic and the schools and the other things. And I'm not saying that that the growth is no longer going to happen. It's just I think there's going to be a lot more questions asked, and there's going to have to be a lot more justification for why a project makes sense. And so that doesn't directly answer your question, but I hope it was add some context for it.
Well, your statistics said there's like 10,000 that entitled. That's going to put probably 20,000 cars on the road because each household will have probably 2 husband and wife or teenage kids. So that's going to put another 20,000 cars on the road up there, and the roads aren't really big enough to handle what's being built right now.
Yeah, and we'll cover that in a little more detail at the Transportation Forum on the 27th. We'll have some experts who give you more information. I saw a hand go up there. Yes, sir.
Yes, so my boys went to high school, familiar with, and obviously guys recognizing what's going on there with the overcrowding. I guess my question is 2 parts, really. Is there any type of priority order, what in terms of land? Is it, hey, this lot is for housing, or schools are a competition, how can you determine who gets the land? Are they even competition, I guess, is maybe housing less acreage? I don't know. Maybe that's something to clarify. But also, is there any thoughts of building another high school closer to that Barlow Road section, 160? Now, Indian Land High School, from where I am, right at Barlow Road, is a 20-minute drive without traffic. I can, ride is more the population. I think you guys recognize that population growth. It's a 2-part question.
Excuse me, repeat that
Sure.
and have people talk louder.
Sure.
Put the mic closer.
I can repeat it. Okay. I think I heard the second one about the school, the overcrowding or building a new high school. I heard that one. And the other one was about prioritizing land use.
Yeah, does it go to
prioritization of land use, whether it's commercial, residential, you want to talk about that one
Yeah,
first?
I think, and so.
Talking to the microphone so we can.
I understand. Okay, that's a little better. So I think it's a great question because that's really kind of the foundations of what we're doing here tonight and what we're doing with the comprehensive plan process. The answer is yes. We do have a long-range plan. You heard the future land use map that Ben referenced that gives the county kind of a roadmap of where areas are appropriate for building neighborhoods, where is it appropriate for building businesses, and where is it appropriate for building industrial type uses. And I'm just being overly simplistic, but there is a plan. The plan that we have in place today, which was developed at one is off the top of my head around 2012, it's highly generalized. It's in my mind, I've worked historically in cities, and so this is actually my first county position. But in my viewpoint, the plan that we have in place today is a classic county plan. You take a big paintbrush and you just sweep it across this great landscape and give it some generic classification like residential or something, and and that may work in a county that doesn't grow very quickly or doesn't have growth challenges, but it does not work well when you have a county rapidly growing, and really what you have developing is almost a municipality in the Indian Land area. I know that's a different question, and it's popular or unpopular depending on who you ask, but that's in essence what we have cultivated in the Indian Land area. And so that's why we want to use this approach of breaking up the county so we can develop more detailed plans of where different land uses should go and other amenities and improvements that might be needed. Another aspect of your question, if I think I heard it correctly, is that I think the school district, in terms of acquiring land, well, they're actually competing with the private sector, with home builders and business developers for land. They're in that mix, and they have to pay the same prices or as everyone else. And that's what, I think some of the challenges of the district is that trying to find a suitable site, 30-plus acre site in the Indian Land area that has the right access and other features is a challenge because the supply is dwindling and they're having to compete with a lot of other entities and interests.
Just a follow-up to that then, so is it basic dollars and cents if builders come to the county with more money, they'll build housing over the school?
No, it's not that. So he was asking, is it a matter, I'm going to summarize, but is it a matter of dollars and cents regarding with the county approving a new neighborhood versus a new school because the neighborhood might generate more tax revenue? No, that's not it. The school district is a separate entity, and they have to go in and purchase and acquire the land and purchase it and develop it as a school. Yeah, the county doesn't really is not necessarily involved in that direct process unless the site they want to build a school on or need like a rezoning or something like that. So I'll certainly defer to the district, the school district.
Bryan,
Yeah, in reference to land acquisitions, we pretty much operate just as any other entity would. For instance, like Mr. Hardy acquires land for developers, for his company. We go through the same process, just like if a businessman were going to build a business in Indian Land or anywhere in this county. So we basically contract with a realtor who goes out and tries to acquire land or puts parcels together. And there's a certain criteria that we give them. And it really is based on the type of facility we're trying to build. As I said earlier, if we're trying to build an elementary school, we're looking at about 30 acres. It may be about 50 acres for a middle school. And then when you get to a high school, you're talking about a huge parcel, about 100 acres because of all the fields and outlying buildings and things like that. So what we're facing in Indian Land really right now are two things. Number one is really just the lack of large parcels. A lot of those parcels, unfortunately, have been purchased for future development. And so that has created somewhat of a shortage for us. Number two, price, because we are competing against the private sector. And, again, we have a finite amount of money that we can spend on land because, we have to ultimately spend our dollars on building a building, which is where the bulk of that money comes from. And the second part of your question, while we're in the high school, and I can tell you, I actually drew the attendance lines for the last several schools that have been built up there, so I'm really familiar with what you're talking about, concern. And it is a concern if you live on the northern part of the Indian Land area, because you're actually, I remember when this parcel of land was built, or excuse me, purchased, that was the problem we had. Our preference would have been to have bought a parcel of land much further north. But we already had the 3 schools that were located on 521. We couldn't find 100 acres that would take us off of 521 or take us out of congestion, and we couldn't buy it for the price that we needed to buy it for. So ultimately, that's how we settled on buying that piece of property, which is 5 miles south of the old high school, which it does create a problem for traffic, because if you live on Harrisburg Road, there's only one way to get there. You go down Harrisburg, you get on 160, you drive through traffic to get to Indian Land High School. And so it is a problem, and we know that. As far as future, to be quite honest with you, right now, we have enough property on the Indian Land side that we think we could expand in. One of the ideas we kicked around is looking at maybe a 9th grade academy. A 9th grade academy is a standalone building specifically for the 9th grade. We could possibly house that on the brand new site. We could probably do that, and that would be the most cost-effective thing for us to do, because it would, we've got the infrastructure there, the fields, we didn't have to recreate the wheel per se. But we still, down the road, we're going to have to look at a second high school, because once you get to that area, we're built for around 2,000, and if we did 9th grade academy, we could add some there. But at the end of the day, when you start getting up to 2,500, 2,700 kids, that's really too big. And so, yes, the answer is one day we're going to have a second high school further north. The question is can we acquire 100 acres, and where do we put it? One other option that we may end up having to look at is the existing Indian Land site, because again, we had a high school there, we had a football field, we have baseball fields, we have softball fields. Is there something we could do there? So there's a lot of discussion going on, but what you're saying is 100% spot on, but that's as truthful as I can be with you here tonight.
Anybody else over here want to comment on those questions? All right, another question? Sure.
Okay, in the state of South Carolina is mandating that you all have a comprehensive plan. And my question is for Mr. Smith. How binding is that plan? When a developer comes and presents their project to the planning commission and to the council, do they go by a comprehensive plan, or do they go by the UDO?
What's the question? Can you repeat the question?
Can you hear me? The question was, how binding is the comprehensive plan on the council when it approves individual developments? Okay. The UDO, the zoning regulations, subdivision regulations are binding, of course. The comprehensive plan in South Carolina is not. There are states, Florida's one, Maryland, Washington State, where it is. So a development approval in those states, under their statutes, has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's a consistency doctrine, and that's not been adopted in South Carolina. The comprehensive plan is not legally binding. Now, the statute says that the regulations have to be in accordance with the comprehensive plan. So the UDO should be in accordance with the plan, should be consistent with the plan. I'm sorry?
Who comes up with the comprehensive plan?
That will eventually be recommended by the Planning Commission and adopted by the County Council.
It seems like the planning commission is approving everything.
Planning Commission is an advisory body, as Ben said. It makes few final decisions under South Carolina law.
jump in? Any other
No,
opinions?
I think the one thing I just want to make clear on, there was a discussion about, you know, who develops the comprehensive plan. Well, we hope it's a lot of people in this audience and a lot of people, a lot of folks in the community. And that's one of the reasons why we've been kind of holding sessions like this. We've done community open houses. We've done surveys. I hope everyone here had a chance to fill out the survey that was issued 6 or 8 months ago. And so part of that is to get the feedback to make sure that the plan is reflective of what the community needs are and reflects the sentiment of its citizens. And so, yes, the Planning Commission does review the comprehensive plan and will make a recommendation on it. Yes, the council ultimately has to adopt and approve it, but we want to make sure that the citizen engagement is reflected in that plan so that it's reflective of the community itself. So I just want to make sure that that's made clear.
All right. Two gentlemen right there, you don't want to fight it out?
Yeah, quick question. Is the comprehensive plan online where you can find it? And if people want to make comments, how do they submit it?
So there is a website, I'll click ahead to that, Lancaster2040.com. And you can go there. In fact, this meeting is being recorded right now. That will be posted there next week. The previous forums we've held are also on that website. And there is a comment box where you can submit comments. You know, we had a survey. Unfortunately, that closed about 6 months ago. And we had really good participation in that. So, but there still is ability to provide comments at this website. And the old or the existing comprehensive plan you can find on that website as well as the county's website. But this comprehensive planning process is to update that plan, and that information can be found at the Lancaster2040.com. Yes, sir.
I have two questions. One might be a dumb question, but when you talk about zoning for schools and the need to have land to do that, since you've got a greater responsibility to educate our children, can't the zoning laws somehow give advantages so that there is land that has to be made available some way, somehow, so that you've got enough land to build schools? Because you could get to the point where everybody's here and you know where to go to school. And it could be a dumb question, because I'm not into all of the regulations and laws on zoning and how that stuff works. But that's my first question.
Okay.
And my second question is, I live in Sun City. We have over 5,000 people in our community. There are several hundred apartments being developed, built, and occupied right now on Van Wyck Road. Most of those people are going to, when they egress from those areas, they're going to go towards Van Wyck. They're going to try to turn left so that they can go to Charlotte. And one of the concerns that we have, and you may say, well, come to the transportation module, maybe I will, but the concern that we have is that when that backup starts to build, and it's building now, that people are going to go right instead of left. And the next major road is Sun City. And we are a golf course community, 25 miles an hour maximum. People are walking those streets and sidewalks 24 hours a day. And how do you deal with that? I know, obviously those units have been already approved, so nobody's going to stop them from being built. But if there is a spillover that starts to impact our community, how do we deal with that? What advice would you give us?
Well, let's start with the first question, and maybe that's Tyson again, to talk about can you require or help facilitate the development of school sites through zoning or other county policies?
Could, it would be tricky. Schools are generally allowed, I was just checking here, in most of the districts. They're kind of a unique use. As Rox pointed out earlier, that's what the zoning map typically does. It typically identifies places where certain uses are wanted, and you would think the market and values would adjust to that. these sites for schools. Yeah.
Let's add one more, just a different angle to the question, and I think in some respects, at least partially.
Use your mic, please.
Sorry. I think in some respects, at least partially, the county and the school district have already done that. And my numbers might be off, but last year, the school district and the county adopted a school impact fee. And so for every new home that's built in the Panhandle area, or they're assigned to the Indian Land School Assignment Zone, you have to pay, a builder has to pay a fee that goes towards future school construction. And I need some help with that, those fees.
But I would just take first, new homes that are now approved.
That's
So
correct.
Homes that have already been approved to be built are not subject to impact.
That is absolutely correct. And so help me with this, Brian. I know it's around 8,000 and some change for a new apartment, and is it maybe around that same dollar amount for a home, 8,400 maybe? Okay, so that's so in part, yeah, the county and school district had the foresight to recognize these challenges and try to impose those fees on new residential construction in the Indian Land Assignment Zone. Oftentimes, and so that's one aspect of the answer to that question. The other is, it is not out of the realm of possibility that when you see large neighborhoods built, I mean, I'm talking about neighborhoods with 1,000 homes or more, it's not uncommon that school sites are set aside or donated as part of that effort, or some arrangement is made where the school district could, acquire said property. I think that's, and I'll defer to Tyson, but I think that's typically done more on a negotiated basis versus having a regulation that explicitly requires that. And there's obviously very important locational provisions because the school district does not want to have a site set aside for them that they can't use or can't use efficiently. And so, but there are tools, there are processes like that where a site could be dedicated or set aside or reserved for a school in the right circumstances. So I hope that helps to provide some context.
Okay, and as far as the transportation question, our transportation experts are going to be here at the next meeting, but I'd gladly entertain if any panelist wants to answer that question about the transportation issue with the apartments.
Sure. I'll just mention one thing, and definitely come to the other forum because there'll be a lot more information. But one of the things we try to do is we're looking for, new developments to come is to try to recommend collector roads where we don't have them, because right now you've got 521, 160, Harrisburg, Calvin Hall. You've got a few large streets that connect everything, and so if you can get even if it's with the location of another development that comes, if part of that development is a collector road to go between two main areas, that's one thing that we do try to do to avoid what you're talking about with cutting through neighborhoods.
All right, anybody else? Any other, sure, go ahead.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
This is not really a question, it's kind of a hypothetical. My name's Rachel. I'm going to speak for myself, but I do work for Catawba Riverkeeper as our watershed basin manager. So for myself, but for the water and a little for our organization. Our environment's super important. Growth is happening. I'm not going to try to argue against that or say it's not happening or try to convince you all it's bad. It's happening, but our environment's important, and I just want to be that voice of our water and our land. That we have all these new people coming down here. We have houses being built, developments happening, commercial properties. It's happening, but we're the people here that can do something about that and keep our area pretty and keep it healthy and all of those things. So with the zoning, if we have that chance to be that voice on the board that says, let's cut this down 20 more properties, and it's really not giving people that much more to maintain on their property, but it's kind of decreasing that volume of people in there, but also not to a degree that's gonna, make the construction companies wildly pissed that they're not gonna be making more money. Can we convince HOAs to not mandate green grasses that provide zero ecological benefits and do nothing to help filter out the water that's running there's just like so many little pieces of all these things that we can be doing. And this panel up here and everyone that you guys work with are that voice for us and for our river, where like we can't be at all of those meetings saying all of those things. So, long-winded, not really a question. I just wanted to put it out there and be a voice for our environment. If you have questions, if you want to talk to me, I brought cards. You can talk to me after or call me or anything. So.
Thank you so much.
Can I respond to that? I think that was really good. She didn't ask a question. She was commenting that we can make, I'm going to paraphrase, we can make a difference, especially when it comes to the environment, and make sure that, you know, our water's important, you know, all that's important. And what I was going to say was, years ago at Sun City, when we first built that, the folks that owned that golf course could only use organic fertilizers, okay, because of the sensitivity of the Catawba River. And that was put into place. So when we first started building there, homes could not have sprayed chemicals put on them. You know, no, I think that's all gone away now. I'm not sure because I haven't been involved since 2009. However, there are things like that that I'm on another committee that, you know, Brad's also on, and, or he's involved with, excuse me, and we talk about those types of things because our environment is important. And I think you would find that builders and developers want to be a help when it comes to that and not a hindrance. So we all need to be involved with that. And I think that's a really valid point. You know, builders, developers, every planning commission, county council, everybody needs to be involved. I think you make wonderful points.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, because John and I are both on the stormwater commission for the county. Before a few years ago, the county didn't have a stormwater department. We now have one, and they're a great resource for understanding how you can impact these different things. Some things you don't even think about in terms of, you know, the chemicals you are putting on your lawn just to grow, you know, fescue grass. And even down to other things such as, you know, if you wash your car, it's actually better for the environment if you're, you know, washing your car on the lawn instead of on a driveway where all the chemicals are just going to come right down the driveway into the storm sewer system and right into the creeks. And also picking up after your pets in our county is one of the largest impacts you could have just because of what happens from all the runoff of the water that's sitting there and, you know, then running down into the sewer system. So
I'll say it.
Yes.
Animal poop is really bad for our water.
Yeah.
If you don't want E. coli in the water,
yeah.
don't put poop in it.
Yeah, that is really one of the largest impacts for our county for sure. But there's a whole county stormwater group. They're actually up in the Indian Land area, so they have the office there. If you want to stop in there, they have a bunch of great information, a lot of great handouts. They even have little things that hold little bags for picking up dog poops.
Another question? Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, this is a question for the school district. As we continue to build out from Charlotte into that greater Lancaster area, is the school scouting out future land use for schools so that they can properly advise the planning department on those areas to be parking zone as well?
So is the school scouting out new sites, right?
Yeah, we've actively been looking for parcels of property north of Highway 5, actually north, really, Jim Wilson Road for a pretty good while, because that's really the target location where the central numbers of growth are really hurting us the most. And so we hope, you know, sometime in the next 4 or 5 months we'll be able to find a piece of property and purchase a piece of property. And then, you know, part 2 of that is really finding funding mechanisms to be able to build a school. There's no doubt about it. Right now, it's not about planning for a new school. We are past the point of needing a new school. It's a matter now of finding a piece that works and then being able to find the dollars to put the school there. So, yes, ma'am.
The question was pertaining to the greater Lancaster area.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, the greater Lancaster area. Well, right now, the way we're set up in the city of Lancaster, well, for the most part, we have some pretty good room for growth in some of our schools. Our high school, as I said earlier, Lancaster High School is about 1,400 kids right now. We know that we can accommodate 2,000 kids there because that's what it was built for 30 years ago. So we know we have room there. A.R. Rucker, we've got some room to grow there. We feel pretty good about where we are from a growth management standpoint in the city of Lancaster, and even in the areas to the south of Lancaster. We are looking, we would like to certainly, if we could purchase some land and have that land now before the prices go up and before the quantity goes down, certainly that would be ideal, and we hope, there's been some talk, if we ever do go forward with another bond package in the future, that would be a time period that we would like to do some extensive land buying if that were ever to take place.
Do we have time for one more question? Or go ahead.
I'm extremely impressed with the amount of talent that I've heard tonight. This is a very educated and intelligent board, and that I've heard. I wonder how engaged is our county council with the advice that I've heard tonight and some of the panel. This is the third, probably now into 75% of these audience interactions. Has the county council attended these?
So the question is, how engaged has county council been? I can turn it over to you.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and take this one because I'm probably the member up here who is not in the middle of either a business deal or employed by the county council. So I can maybe likely speak the freest, but Jason, I would actually like you to fill in terms of the presentations that you guys have done for the county council or what they've seen in the process so far. At some point, they will definitely, they will get the whole comprehensive plan and they will see everything. Up till now, it's largely been committee meetings, which are meetings, attended by a bunch of us here and then even more representatives from the county. The county council does definitely, care about the information that happens at these sessions and deals a lot with the people who are sitting up here on a regular basis in terms of the information. I think what you may want to be thinking about is if you have important information that you want to convey to the county council, as we get closer to having this comprehensive plan be written up and adopted by the county, is the county council is going to hear this in a environment where you can give your public comment directly to them. We will, on the Planning Commission, also hear this. So we're going to have a public hearing period where we talk about this and people come in and talk. By all means, that is one of the best places to give your feedback. And Jason, I'll let you comment on your meetings with the county council and presenting information to the county council.
Yeah, sure. We've had several presentations and updates to the county council, as well as planning department staff has provided updates to the county council, and we'll continue to do that throughout the process as it moves forward. There will continue to be opportunities for the public to be involved as well. We're not going to have any more. We have one more forum planned, which is the 27th, but there will be public meetings and opportunities for you to be involved as the process moves forward. And those will be, most likely around the March timeframe. And just like this past round of meetings we did in June, well, actually July and the first part of August, we will have meetings in different locations in the county as well, so that you don't have to feel like you have to drive to Kershaw to provide input. You can do that in Indian Land or in Greater Lancaster. We'll have meetings all across the county as the plan continues to move forward. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment. I think I saw one more hand there earlier. You're good? It's 8:30, so that was a lot of information for 2 hours. Appreciate the patience, and I hope you learned something, and feel free to share this information. Once again, I hope to see you all at the 27th. for the Transportation Forum. And please check out the website if you have any questions. Thank you so much.